been a long break, recess that we've had. And I just want to say for disclaimer, when I first was asked to teach a parenting class, I kind of was shocked. One, because I'm not a parent. Two, I'm not a parent on the way to be anytime soon. And three, I'm not even an older sibling to younger siblings. I am the youngest. So I was like, are you sure I'm qualified? But I had a few weeks of doing it, and it was a lot of fun. So I just encourage for the audience, those who are actual parents, teachers, babysitters, older siblings to younger siblings, to give your feedback, your suggestions, and your experiences, because that's going to help us really dissect this book, okay? And since it's been such a long time, I'm just going to review lessons 1, 2, and 3, and then we're going to restart on lesson 4, okay? So in lesson 1, we cover a lot about so you're a parent on the way, what to do to encourage the mothers to read to their children in the womb, to teach them because they can actually understand what you're saying. We covered a lot about what to do when they have arrived, you know, changing diapers, feeding, and sleeping habits. And then we also covered the role of a father because it is a shared responsibility. And in lesson 2, we cover about character and the importance of training your child in positive character because they are the future leaders of tomorrow. And in lesson 3, we cover more in detail about positive character versus negative character, the difference between the two. And now in lesson 4, which we will cover the role of a parent, okay? And there was 3 kind of sub jobs they gave under the role of a parent. Does anyone remember what they were? There are 3 certain things. So they kind of had like 3 different titles. Yes, I have one hand. Shout it out. Disciplinarian is one, yes. What else is there? Yes. Provider. And the last one is, I hear it, teacher. So we have teacher, provider, and disciplinarian. So we're going to call it TPD of parenting, okay? So let's turn over to LP4A. And that's our lesson plan there. So the purpose and objective for LP4A, it says parents will be introduced to the roles of teachers, provider, and disciplinarian as a part of effective parenting. And we have our materials, the P Solution parenting manual, which we all have, the activity cutouts, and pencils and pens, which I know you all carried with you today. And for procedure 1, as we all know, it's a review of the previous lesson. So our first question here says, what is the difference between character and personality? So what you've learned in Piece of Solution, what is the deciding factor, the difference between the two? And we're going to have a little roaming mic coming around. So in your own words, what's the difference between personality and character? So as you're all thinking, one thing that we realize is that very early on is that character is something that's within a person. And personality is what you see when you first meet that person. So character you don't see when you first meet them, and it takes a while to actually understand what their character is. And we have a hand over here.
Your personality is your likes and dislikes, and your character is your belief. Your belief?
Yes. Okay, so your character, it says here in the book, is a combination of traits that enables us to choose between a right or wrong behavior, whereas personality defines our personal likes, our dislikes, our mannerisms, and interests. And one thing that we really want to emphasize is that we all can have different personalities, that's fine, but we all want to strive to have the same character, which is that positive character. Okay, so number B, or letter B, is what are morals? So in your own words, what are morals? And I want us to think back on the character unit, because when we first heard about moral values and morals, what we feel. Yes.
From the character book, we learned that morals are rules. Well, it's actually the core principles that which you take that dictate who you are.
Okay, thank you. Yes, so morals are beliefs or principles that govern the way people think and behave. And those moral values is something that we can all agree on. So one being, none of us want to raise our hand and say, oh, I want to get stolen from today. I want my wallet to get stolen from me. None of us can say that because we all believe strongly in the rights of ownership and what we have possessions over. And so for question A and B, you can reference page 17. And for number C, it says, what is the first step in developing positive moral character? So from what we've been learning, what's that first step? Yes. It's a Eugenia all the way in the back.
The first step is to become educated.
Yes, perfect. The first step is to become educated, and in doing so, we have to evaluate ourselves. So we'll never stop learning how to develop positive moral character. We don't get to that point where, we think that we finished all of it. We're constantly, consistently evaluating ourselves and seeing where we fall short in order to build on. So for procedure 2 now, it says tell students. Okay, so let me go back to actually number C, and I just want you to reference page 20. Because that's what we're talking about, evaluating yourself, examining yourself, educating yourself on that. And then for procedure 2 now, it says, tell students that in today's class, they will learn the effective parenting, fill 3 main roles. Ask the class to predict what those roles were, and we cover those. Choose a volunteer to read the first 2 paragraphs on page 25. Tell students that a positive parent fulfills the 3 roles of teacher, provider, and disciplinarian. In fact, we often use all 3 at the same time. Have students brainstorm what each role would entail. Note for time's sake that allows students to present only a few ideas for each category. So let's turn over to page 25. And you can reference on the top there, LP4A, procedure 2. I know this is kind of a review, so you probably already have all these notes, but I just encourage you to write them down, okay? So for my first question, before we get into this page here, what are some of the job details of being a teacher? So let's get the first one. So when you're a teacher, you're a parent, okay, what does that job entail? And as you're all thinking, we have Eugenia there too, once again.
Classroom management.
Yes, classroom management. That's a really great one. Actually managing their behaviors, telling them what is acceptable versus what is not acceptable. Okay, anything else? We have a hand over here. Oh, go ahead.
Encouraging and motivating.
Encouraging and motivating. That's very important very early on in children's lives. Encouraging and motivating. And we had one more hand right across.
I would say having a plan. It goes with classroom management, but if you're floundering and making it up as you go, it's not going to you might succeed, but just barely.
Okay, so having a plan, that's very important. And this is kind of our plan. The P solution here is our plan. We have our rules that we use. And she said not making it up as you go, because children can see through that. If one day you're really you let a behavior slide, and then the second day you actually put the hammer down and tell them, no, don't do that, they'll be like, but yesterday I was able to do it. So they'll actually see through your behavior. Okay, so we covered teacher. Our second one is provider. So what are some of what does a job entail about being a provider? So yes, we want our children to all survive. They have to have food, they have to have clothing, they have to have shelter. But what else is there? Because barely surviving is not enough, right?
I would say they need structure. And as a provider, you have to make sure that they have a structural foundation. And without it, they will not be able how to maintain themselves in the future or even in the present time. Turn it back to you.
That is a great one, structure, okay? And as we've covered is that when you do give them structure, later on in life, they'll have that structure. So they wouldn't be sporadic, they wouldn't be trying to figure it out as they go, and they'll be more able to have a successful adulthood. Go ahead.
I was thinking beside food, clothing and shelter, children also need support. They need a healthy support system. And with that being said, at times, they're still learning themselves. So sometimes the emotion can get wild. As parents, you need to know how to guide it in a structured way so that it's healthy.
Support is what they need. When they come home and said, Mom, this is what occurred to me. Give me some advice. They'll know that, you're honest and that you're caring and that you understand them and that they can come to you when they need help. So that support is very important. Okay, we got a few more hands. One over here.
Children also need individual attention because you might have a lot of children growing up, or even if you only have two children, each one of them need their own individual attention and they scream for it. And you must be able to set aside time to give them that attention that they needed.
Yes, individual attention. So my mom always says that none of her children are the same, and so that when we were all born and she's seen different, behavior traits and she had to deal with it differently. And so no children are the same. And so individually understanding who your child is, what they appreciate, what they like to do, this is going to help you easily parent them as well. Okay, so going on to our third and last category, disciplinarian. What does that job entail? Now, when we hear discipline, a lot of time people automatically think spanking their child. Okay, that's not what we're covering here because there is a healthy and positive way to discipline your children. So, what do you think of? And it goes back to that support and that structure because rules helps to discipline your children. Give them guidelines in order what to do, what not to do, and not that they step out. And when they do, you explain to them, well, you made the wrong choice. What can you do to make up for that? Yes.
I was thinking just the very first step is the role model, what you're expecting.
That is a really great
That
one.
helps a lot.
The best way to teach is through our example. So role modeling what you expect from your children, and then they'll give it back to you. Okay, anything else? Oh, we have one more hand up here. That'll be the last one.
I would say consistency and being that model where you following through everything that you have put in that foundation. Mm-hmm. Like you said before, you can't say, oh, not today, but then yesterday it was allowed. I'll turn it back to you.
So consistency is very important and following up on it too. Okay, so we're going to continue on in page 25. And do I have a volunteer to read the first two paragraphs? So it says, what does it really mean to parent a child? So volunteer to read the first two paragraphs. Don't be scared. I don't bite, okay? Okay, we have one all the way back. I think Elizabeth. Thank you.
What does it really mean to parent a child? To raise a child encompasses many different aspects. Most people agree that a parent must provide a child's basic physical needs such as food, clothing, shelter, and protection. They must also provide love, attention, and training in moral character education. Another important aspect of training a child is in teaching proper social skills. Teaching a child to ask, may I, and say thank you, please, and excuse me should never be overlooked. All of these aspects are included in the definition of the word raise. To effectively parent and raise a child, one must be able to successfully take on the role of teacher, provider, and disciplinarian. Although these roles will be explained as three separate functions, they are interdependent and many of the characteristics overlap. There will be occasions when you use all three at once. Let's take a closer look at each of these roles.
Okay, thank you so much. So one thing that we want to really highlight here is teaching our children proper social skills. Because truth is, they won't always be in your home. So there will be times they'll have to leave, have to go to school, have to interact with people. How do they do that successfully? And that's basically what they use your training at home for, and they go out into the world, and then they kind of mirror the same thing. And then we also want to make sure that we include here, of course, we teach academics. It's very, very important. No one can say academics are not important. But we also want to teach proper positive moral character development, because those two things go hand in hand, and there must be a balance between the two. So in a little box here, it says the law of cause and effect. To every action, there is a reaction. What you put in is what you'll get out. And we want to make a note here that effective parenting establishes a certain pattern of behavior. And we talked about consistency, and then we carried it out. Okay, so we're going to turn back over to LP4A and read procedure 3 here. So LP4A, procedure 3, it says have volunteers read excerpts under your role as a teacher and teaching the very young on pages 25 to 27. Remind students that as parents, our role as teachers begins even before the child's birth. Although there are many concepts to teach children, basic lessons of compassion, tolerance, and service to others can aid the growth and development of positive moral character in our children. So we're going to turn back now to page 25. And right before we get to the heading, your role as a teacher, make sure you write that procedure in there. So it says here, to teach is to give or share knowledge so that someone else can learn. And if you have the time, underline that as your definition, to teach. It says, as parents, you are your child's first and most influential teacher. Remember, your role as a teacher begins long before your child is born. And we really want to stress that importance there. So we don't have to wait for our children to be born in order to teach them. They can learn within the womb. And also you can, adapt a certain genetics. We talked about positive character development and how it's genetically wise. So even before, like myself, you can learn positive character development, put that within your genes, and that can be passed down to your children. So there's never too late or too soon to learn these things. Going on, is to keep in mind that at a 16-week gestation, babies can hear their mother's voice in the womb with no distortions. Babies can also hear those in the immediate environment as well as television and radio. And we want to reference here page 1 and page 3 that as parents, we must provide a suitable learning environment. And I think in those pages, we're really talking about within the womb, but when they arrive, you can also create a learning environment within your home where that's suitable as well. Okay. So continuing on here, it says teaching the very young. Now, before we get into this paragraph, what are some concepts, like it says here, certain concepts that you can teach your children at the youngest age? What are some concepts that you can implement within your child? And I want us to think back on the kindergarten series. I think that's what it's called. Remember that acronym we had, ORASH? That's what kind of reminded me of. So we can teach all of those very important character traits to our children. Okay, we have a hand.
Well, the basic concept of ownership, that's one of the foundations of the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program. So right away, along with ownership, comes that concept of ask first before touching.
Yes, ownership. What's mine is mine and what yours is yours. And it is okay. I love the idea that it is okay to say no, because no is okay. A lot of times that's something that children take a while to understand. They're like, you're being mean because you didn't let me borrow this. I'm like, no, it's not being mean. It's just the rules and how it goes. So ownership and asking, very important. Okay, anything else? Teaching your child at a very young age. Or what are some things that you've taught your children at a very young age? Just make it more personal. Yes.
One of the concept, learning personal hygiene at a very early age. They go outside and play in the yard. You have to come back and wash your hand. And that developed the aspect of when you have like where you have your self-image, and that helped them to appreciate themselves at a very early age.
That's a really great one. So we know that as we're teaching, we're laying a foundation. So you said hygiene is very important. Before you eat at the table, wash your hands, brush your teeth every single morning. All these things are very important, and that actually helps your children understand that they are important and that they have to have a positive self-image. That's really great. Okay, something else that we can teach our children, and I'm seeing more hands, is the asking permission before doing anything. Polite manners. How important is polite manners? I've been taught a lot of these things very early on, and I can see where we have it lacking in society. So I've been trained when we enter a room, be it you get from your bedroom or wake up early in the morning, see parents in the kitchen, you have some form of greeting. So morning, how is your night? Do you have any dreams? and it kind of opens up the conversation, right? But there is a lot of children that you see nowadays, and I say nowadays knowing that I'm only 18, but nowadays who they see an adult, they see a friend, they walk, do whatever they have to do, disregard the person that's actually there and keep on walking. And I just find that very disrespectful because of what I've been trained and taught. But many people find that normal. Like, if I don't have to talk to you, I'm not talking to you. That's normal for them. So really instilling very early on in your children the importance of polite manners, greetings, very, very important. And that will help them, their social skills when they come out of your home into society. Okay. So I was talking about Orash. We had ownership. Respect is very important. Respect for myself. And when I have that, I can respect others, the environment, property, and possessions. We have the asking. Self-control. Okay, that is so important. So I have seen a lot of people who probably didn't understand or learn about self-control. So they have little tangents and then they become adults with tangents. And that gets on my nerves because I know if they had self-control, they can be able to control their emotions and not talk like a screaming baby when we're having a conversation. So self-control, so important. So controlling your actions, your attitudes, controlling your emotions. And then honesty is the best policy. We learn that very early on. So as children, we know sometimes make mistakes. So be it you broke something of mom's, what do? Normally, we try to hide it, sweep it underneath the rug. They come in and they don't see anything's wrong. A few days pass by, where's my vase at? And then we have to tell them. But I learned very on, because I've done that before, the importance of just owning up to what you do. And that would help you actually in maturity for your own accountability. So tell mom, we were throwing a ball around the room. We know we're supposed to do outside, but we decided to come inside and do it. The ball fell and then broke your vase, and we're so sorry. And then my consequence was that I had to pay back the vase through my allowance. But that was very important because I learned how much vases are. They are expensive. We have a hand over here.
I would like to comment on the self-control. I think it's very important, especially with children. Yes or no when they ask for something. Later, not now, probably is not really a direct answer because the question comes up when. And 2 minutes later, can I? But if they got that straight yes or no, it's over. I'll turn it back to you.
That's a really great one. So learning to accept yes and no, something that children go under, because I know disappointment is hard. When you expect mom to say yes and they say no, like I get sad real quickly. But in society, in the world, there are people who say yes and no, so that's okay. But also, like you said, having parents just having those two answers, because sometimes they'll say, ask me later, or I'm not quite sure. And in my mind, I already know they're saying no, so I get the language of it, but just saying outright is going to help them later on too. Thank you. So we're going to continue on. Let's get the page right. Okay, yes, we're continuing on here. It says, there are many concepts you can begin teaching even the youngest child, of which character education is the primary one. When you teach very young children, do not be concerned if they do not respond or give any indication that they will hear you or understand what you are doing. And we just want to make a note there to never force a young child to respond. Repetition sets it in their minds, yet verbal communication can be difficult the younger the child. So a lot of times we talk to our children, and this is something that I see a lot of parents do. They might baby talk to their child, and their child's looking at them like, I understand everything you're saying, and you're talking down to me. So there's like a middle between baby talk and then, of course, highfalutin talk, because we don't want to do that either. We want them to understand what we're saying, but you don't have to put on the baby voice and be like, I want you to go do this or whatever. It's very strange to me, okay? So knowing that they do understand your words, they might not say, yes, I understand what you're saying, but in their actions later on, you'll see they heard every word that you said. So it says here, they do hear you, and all the information you give the child is being internalized. And I want us to remember about the subconscious mind, how everything is stored in there. So they might not need that information exactly now, but later on they'll remember mom always said this, and repetition is okay, because whoever said once I said it one time, I said it 1,000 times, does not know about teaching children, because once you said it once, you gotta keep on saying it 1,000 more times, and then they might catch it. Okay, so it says here, one day your child will say something that will make you realize he was listening all along. You will be amazed. So keep teaching, give it time, and you will not be disappointed. Read the following excerpt to better understand a child's ability to learn at a young age. Babies know the difference between great and evil. At 6 months, study reveals, at the age of 6 months, babies can barely sit up, let alone take their first tottering steps, crawls, or talk. But according to psychologists, they have already developed a sense of moral code. Remember those moral values we talked about? They've developed that and can tell the difference between right and wrong. An astonishing series of experiments is challenging the views of many psychologists and social scientists that human beings are born as blank slates and that our morality is shaped by our parents and our experiences. And right there, the last couple words, shaped by our parents and experiences, I want you to reference GFIS or GFIC or however you pronounce it on character unit page 4. And I want us to review that and never lose sight of it. So does anybody know what G is? We're going to shout it out because we know. Yes, genetics. I've heard it. Okay, what about F? Family values. I. Influences. E. Any E. Environment. Let's take environment. C. Choices. And E last. Experiences, right? So I want us to keep that in mind that all of this entails our character development. So we might be in a bad environment. That's okay. When all is not lost, you can still learn the positive character development and apply that and change your environment. Because environment doesn't always mean the places that you live, but it can be the people you surround yourself with. So find positive friends. And then also we want to really, if you have a highlighter, highlight in that paragraph that at the age of 6 months, and you kind of like jump down a little bit, they have a really developed a sense of moral code and can tell the difference between right and wrong. And that's very important because a lot of times we think, oh, we got to wait until they get a little older, then teach them this is right, this is wrong, but they already know. So that's very important, okay? Looks like I'm out of time, but I had a lot of fun. And with this, I would like you to welcome up our second speaker.
Hello, everyone. It's great to see everyone back to the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program, learning, growing, becoming the people that the Character Education Program can make us into be. I'm so glad, and let's give Hadassah a great hand. She did a wonderful job, which proves that you don't have to actually be in a place or do a certain thing to be able to teach it. You have to have that education, and that's what the character education program is all about. Getting that character education, being willing to learn and apply it to your life. I'm so glad that she went over the other chapters, and I just want to go back a little myself too, because this is for parenting and showing us how to be a parent. And one thing I want everyone to know is that it's not something we automatically know when we start having and raising a family. And I will explain why. I came from a small farming community, and I was pregnant with my first child, as it was visibly pregnant. And we were at one of our farm community gatherings, and we were having a cookout, and everybody brought a dish, and all the farmers were talking farm stuff, crops, planting, this and that and the other thing. And one of the women who I never met before in our organization, she came over to me and she said, "Oh, I'm so glad you're going to have your first baby soon." And I said, "Well, a couple more months, yes." And she goes, "Are you planning on nursing your child?" And I said, "Yes." And she goes, "Do you know how?" And I said, "No, well, I thought it was like really natural. It would just come natural." So no, I didn't take classes on it. I really didn't know, but that's what I knew I wanted to do. And she was from the Lacia League. And she asked me, "Do you want to come to one of our meetings where we learn how to breastfeed our babies?" And I thought, you actually have to go learn this? And so I said, yes, I do. I want to come. And so the night before, I made the decision I would go to this meeting. And it changed my life. It was amazing. I was so much that I didn't know about raising children. You grow up in your family and you do what your mother did and your grandmother did, but I knew I wanted it different because none of us were breastfed. It wasn't something none of my sisters did, but I knew I wanted to. And when I got there, it was more than just what I thought. It was a nurturing. It wasn't just a raising. When we do things for our children, it isn't just, okay, feed them, clothe them, put them to bed, wake them up mechanically. It's having that, it's what they taught. It wasn't just that us women sat around. All these women brought their babies. They all were nursing their babies, and we talked about babies. We talked about little children. We talked about how to nurture and embrace motherhood, and to realize that that was such an important thing to do. And so what I want everyone to realize is when you're raising your children, it's not something we have to do alone. We are here to support one another and encourage one another, not condemn and put down, but to build up, because we are a community of builders. And when we get together and we learn things and we raise our children together, it can be an amazing experience. Mine was. I mean, I just was so thankful I went to that meeting. I went to that meeting until I had my second, and then I was like, I think I got it now. I think. And it was beautiful. I mean, it was like I didn't realize how nurturing was so, so important, but that it is. It is very important. And with this slide, I have a slide that we went over this, Hadassah did, when she said the law of cause and effect. To every action, there is a reaction. So if you were to teach that to your child, and you would tell them that, what would you ask them? I'll tell you one thing I would ask them. Is this a positive statement or a negative statement? And I would like to see what my child would say, because it's just a statement. But some people would think it's negative, and some would think it's positive. And you could really start to see where your child's mind is at. And that's what you really want. You don't want to have that child just mirror everything you do without thinking for themselves. You want to teach them to think. So I would ask them, is this positive or negative, or how do you look at that? And let them tell you if they can. So that's one of the things that I feel is very important in raising children, and I see that here too about where babies know the difference on page 26 between good and evil at 6 months. And that's a very true statement. I know it is. I think my last child was born an adult already because he just he just seemed like he knew so much. And it was because I had 4 before that I made mistakes and learned from, and then you start to realize what's the most important thing. And when Hadass was saying about, did you ever break something and you sort of want to hide it? And well, my older children were like that at first, but that last one, when we realized, mistakes are okay, accidents are okay, and it was like he went in the bathroom and he wanted to use my mirror that was hanging on the wall, I guess. And he took the mirror down and it must have dropped into the bathtub. And so he was so excited. He came to me and he said, "Mom, come and see." And I'm like, okay. And so we go in the bathroom, and at first I didn't know it was in the bathtub because everything looked okay. And he said, "No, Mom, look in the bathtub." And I'm like, wow. And he's like, "Aren't you glad it didn't break all over the floor?" And when your child is so willing to know, because he knew I wasn't going to get upset, because that was just an accident. His being a person and how important he was more important than me telling him that he should not have done that, should be more careful. Now, we did talk about it after he was done. After we were done cleaning up, I said, "Let's clean this up together, and we'll talk about this, and what could you have done next that you wouldn't have broken and it wouldn't have fell in there." Well, we talked about those things. But when it occurred, it isn't the time to, like when a child, hurts themselves, you're like, "What's wrong with it? What did you do?" They're bleeding half to death and you're asking them questions that don't matter. I've seen that. And it's like, no, you address the situation first and then you can talk about it when everything's calmed down. But I just will tell you, when you make sure that what the most important thing to you is your child's well-being and how they look at themselves, and that mistakes are okay and we're going to work these things out, that's the most important thing at every step of the way. So yes, they do know the difference between great and evil. Now let's go on to teach your child on page 26, your child to love learning. Could I have someone read that section there, please? Would someone like to read that section? Yeah? Kona Cheyenne, would you like to read that section? Yes? That's why I love that eagerness.
Teach your child to love learning. Even before your child is born, talk to him about the natural world, the blue of the sky and water, the colors of the trees and flowers. Sing to your child in a soft tone of voice. This can continue after your child is born and through their youth. Remember, babies love the sound of their mother's voice. Also read to your baby and toddler. This too can continue throughout their youth. Then encourage them to read to you. Keep in mind that conversations about our natural world can be extended to include older children as well. Take nature walks with them and make it a point to discover something new every day, week, or month.
Thank you. When you love to learn, it becomes part of your life. It becomes who you are. You start asking questions just about everything. My children ask a ton of questions. In fact, my dad said I asked a ton of questions. He would be out fixing the tractor, taking the tractor apart, and I'd ask, "What does that mean? Where does that go? What is that?" Finally, he said, your amount of questions has come to an end. Because not that he didn't like me asking questions. I just wanted to know everything, and sometimes he had to concentrate on getting that tractor put back together. But encourage your children. Why do you think it's so important to encourage your children to ask questions? Is it important to you to allow your children to ask questions? Yes, back there.
Yes, it's very important to teach your children to ask questions because the peaceful solution encourages us to become educated. And in order to become educated, you have to gather all the facts. The only way to gather the facts is to research by asking questions. It's a great thing. It's a great tool.
Thank you. It is a great tool. And we have another over here back, right there. Yeah, you can get, yes. Believe me.
When they ask questions, it also helps you to see where they're at in their understanding.
Yes. And we can start seeing where they're looking, how they're looking at something, and learn how to readdress it if it's going in the wrong way, but not telling them it's going the wrong way, but just sort of ease them back into that straight and narrow. Yes.
Yeah, also, I recall one time I had asked my daughter the big question that everybody asks you, is the cup empty or half full? And she was about 6, and she said, well, it depends. Did you drink out of it? And I said, no. She said, then it's half full. And it made me realize that she had that idea, that concept of how things work. And I was able to work with her according to her understanding in certain matters. Back to you.
And I bet you encouraged her always to keep asking questions and always allowing her to express it the way she wanted to. Yes.
So it keeps that open door of communication, that line of communication that you do need, because sometimes they might, if you shut that down and that question still need to be answered, they will go to someone else. So that's where you can actually guard their thoughts. Or sometimes somebody might give them misinformation or wrong information. By them coming to you, that line of communication, you can correct the wrong. And you'll be the one that is feeding them and nourishing them that information.
Great. And because then you'll know exactly how that question needs to be answered for your child. And that's a very important point for a teacher or a parent. Yes.
I also think it helps to build confidence because most children in classroom settings, they're afraid because you might think they're stupid. So it helps build confidence that when they ask the question, they don't have to necessarily know the answer, but they're here to receive the answer and not feel ashamed for even asking the question in the first place.
That's great. And that's so true because children tend to go with how they think they're viewed. I homeschooled my children at the age of the fifth grade. My one son went to school, and he is a very compassionate, a very loving child. And the teacher said, you know, even when the other children didn't quite know how to, he just would always give her compliments and help her after class and do things for her. But he said the other students wouldn't do that because it was like they were into their own thing. And she said, he just knows how to connect with people. And that's something that's so important is when we can teach our children to connect with people and not with things or ideas that might be wrong, but to connect with people so that they can learn how to become one in society. Not that they have to have that same personality, but at least they'll know that the society that they want to be a part of, that they know how to do that. Yes, can I have a comment here?
It also teaches them how to have social skills, to encourage them to ask you questions and then y'all have a conversation back and forth about it. Sometimes you talk to someone who is younger and they'll shrug their shoulders like, I don't know. But to teach them to ask you questions and then they learn how to talk either to their peers or to an adult.
Right. I know we talk about that a lot, don't we? We think it's very important. And it is. It's very important that we talk. To spend time, time with your children is never wasted. I don't care if you're just watching them sit down. My one loved to go out in the back where we had a little stone quarry, and he would ask to go out there, but I'd tell him he couldn't go out alone because we lived in a like a really rural community, and we were out in the country, and it was 160 acres of wooded land and stuff. So it's like I said, you can't go out there unless someone goes with you. So he just asked sometimes, you want to go with me? I would take my book and I would just let him do his thing, pick up rocks, put them in the pocket, get him out when he found a new one. When the pocket got so full, he had to decide which one he didn't want and throw that one back and put him back in, and not interrupting him unless he wanted to have that conversation. But that was a time that he wanted to spend out there. And that's so important that we let our children have the time to just go out and think for themselves without too much bombardment. They've done studies where if you keep going on and on and on with feeding information but never letting them digest it, it's just like too much information, and they need time just to pick up rocks and put them back down. And all that while they might be thinking about your math class or a book that you've read to them, but they need that time to do those things also. Yes.
When I was young, I had a lot of questions and I used to bombard my poor mother with too many. And her way of dealing with it was to say, I like that question, but I'm not going to answer it. I want you to answer it. So you think about it seriously, and tell me what you think the answer was. And so she'd get a very long moment of peace while I had to figure out the answer and then bring it back to her. And she'd tell me, listen to me, and then tell me if I found the right conclusion or not.
You had a very wise mother. And that also taught you a lot as a child that you can find answers, that you don't always have to just, nowadays, phone. How do you get to, or what is the biggest continent on the earth? Your answer is right there. But if you have to go and research it, a child will find so much joy in that, because there's so much more you find in just knowing that fact, because you'll look at it and say, hey, I didn't know that Victoria Falls was in Africa, and look how big, that's the world's largest waterfall. I went there, Not really in my physical, but in my mind, in my children's mind. We went many places in this world, and that's okay to let them know that just because we can't get there right now physically, we can still learn about it, and we can still dream of being there, and we can still see the wonders that this whole earth is made of. So that is a great thing to do for your child, is to go on a trip somewhere in your living room while you're looking at a book. Yes. Did someone have a question or a comment? Oh, here we have one over here in the purple, and then we'll move on after this one.
Even though you're teaching your children and you're having them ask and everything, if you do have them do some research and stuff, it's really cool because you learn as well. And I like that with my children because I was able to expand what I had known too.
Right. I think I've learned so much from my children. I'm just amazed at motherhood, what you all learn from little people. Little people about being humble and being yielding and forgiving and all those things that are important that are taught in the character education program. So it talks about here of learning something new every day or week or month. Every day, you learn something new every day. And to talk about the things that you learn. Teach your child about compassion. The character trait of compassion allows us to care about the needs of others and to desire to relieve their suffering. Develop this trait by teaching your child to have concern for others, whether they are hurt, hungry, lonely, scared, or etc. Role model the character trait of compassion at every opportunity. And ask your child how he would feel if he were in a similar situation. How would he want someone to help him? Encourage him to inquire of the health and well-being of family members. Now, how do you incorporate that into your family or your school as being a teacher? How do you ask that child something, or if something occurs and someone does get hurt? That's an important thing. Yes. Do you have a comment? Yes.
when my daughter was in elementary school, I think she was in second grade, and there was this new student. And the parent said to me that she was very concerned because her daughter was being bullied. And I felt so bad because of the things the parent was telling me. So on my way home with my daughter, I'm talking to her about it. And my daughter stops and she said, "Ma, you don't understand." And I'm like, "What? I don't understand why. She stinks." And I'm like, "My daughter? You bullying somebody?" And she's like, "Yes, she just smells so bad." And I'm like, "So explain to me what occurred." So as she's telling me what occurred, the teacher made my daughter walk closer to her. And my daughter didn't want to because the young girls didn't smell well. And the teacher asked my daughter, "Why is she walking so slow?" And my daughter didn't want to answer. And then the teacher yelled at her. And that's when my daughter said, "She stinks." So all the children started laughing. So I told my daughter, "You created the problem. You have to fix it. You made everybody treat this girl bad. You have to find something you like about her that you could actually bring her up and invite everybody else to see that, because now it falls into your responsibility. The teacher should have said something privately to you, but I'll speak to the teacher in the morning." So I spoke to the parent and asked the parent, "Do you put any chemicals on your daughter's hair?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "Okay, my daughter's sensitive to those smells." And I explained to her what had occurred. And I told her it wasn't meant deliberately, but it never was corrected by the teacher. I said, "Now we have a problem." And I said, "But my daughter's going to fix it." And she said, "Oh, I see." I said, "Again, I'm very sorry of what had occurred." By two weeks, probably 3, the parent comes back to me and she said, "My daughter was a very shy girl before we moved here." She said, "Now she doesn't shut up." She said, "Whatever your daughter did made my daughter such a new person." They were best friends all the way to the end of the year. And only thing my daughter did was what I instructed to do: find something you like. And the mother took her part and tried to change what she was putting on her daughter's hair. And with that, I take it back to you.
Yeah, that was very wonderful. That was very wonderful. And I love how you put it back into her hand, taking that responsibility for what she had created. And one thing too is sometimes we want to defend our children without getting all the facts. And I'm glad you didn't do that, because we need to look at the situation. And that's what the peaceful solution is all about too, is getting the facts so that you don't just defend someone because they belong to you. You defend what is right and you instruct how to do it. And I think that's beautiful. I think it's wonderful. And I think I feel very strong about that, because our children need to become what the character education program can develop in them. And it's our responsibility to bring them to that and to make it doable. And it is doable. We know it's doable. We've seen the results of the peaceful solution. So that's why we have great hope, and that's why we share this with everyone in the world, is to know that the peaceful solution character education changes the heart, changes the mind, changes the reactions, the actions. You know, even if you have a bad action toward you, the reaction that we used to do, we don't do anymore. And if we do, we apologize, and we know that we've, had a step backwards. But you know what? It didn't mean we failed. You only fail when you give up. And that's what you tell your children. You only fail when you give up. And we don't give up. We're not giver-uppers. We're doers, and we keep going. And that's so important. And I think it's so important to listen to your children, to really listen to what they're saying, not hearing what you want to hear, but listen what they're saying. And really support what they're saying, even if you don't sometimes agree with it. And I'll tell you what I mean. My one son, the very compassionate one, he had a trouble reading with the word said, S-A-I-D. He would write it S-E-D, and I would correct him, and his teacher would correct him. And I said to him, why do you just not write it S-A-I-D instead of S-E-D? He's like, Mom, bed, read, fed, Ted said. And I said, I agree with you. I said, I agree that that's the way, if I wrote the English language, it would be SED. I agree with that. But because we didn't write it, it's SAID. I said, if we ever get to write our own language, it's going to be SED. And so it wasn't like you just tell him he's wrong. You're going to let him know that it still isn't acceptable. But I think he's right. So sometimes children can be right and the whole world can be wrong, and it's okay. Okay, so compassion is very important because we want to teach our children that people are more important than getting across that finish line first, because your friend fell down in front of you and he was ahead of you, but you could have won that race, but instead you stopped and you helped him up and you wiped the blood off his knee, and someone else went across that line. But you know what? You were really the winner. You were the winner of that race, of knowing how to be the person that you're supposed to be. And when you can tell your children that, and when your child comes home with a C on its report card, I know how hard that was for you to get that. But I know you put every effort, every ounce of effort into you, and I am so pleased with what you did. And I know that, you did the best. Now, if you know they didn't do the best, then you got to tell them that too. But not all your children are going to be A students. I'm one. I wasn't an A student. My brother was a very A student. And we don't compare our children. We look at their strengths, we encourage them, and we help them be the best they can be. So if C's the best you can be, you did your best. And you make sure your child knows that. You make sure they know it. And you make sure that you are so pleased with them that they are like smiling from ear to ear because they got a C on their test. Okay? So now teach your child to care about others, regardless of their nationality or ethnicity. Hate is a learned behavior. So right there we see that everything that you saw up here, that baby has a lot that you can put into it. And you get to make a choice of what you're going to put in that child. And you have a big responsibility as a parent to choose to make the right choices. And that's what this here is all about. I mean, the parenting manual, yes, it's for us to raise our children, but to teach us how to do this, to teach us how to do it the most effective, so that when you go to bed at night and you tuck your little children in and you give them their hug and you tell them how much you love them, you know that you can sleep well that night because you did the best you could. And so you made a little mistake, but you told your child, I'm sorry, I talked to you the way you did, I didn't have self-control. That is going to mean a lot to your child. That will mean that my mom and dad's human too, that they make mistakes too, but they can come and they can say you're sorry. And that is an important thing to teach your child too, is to say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't try the hardest. I'm sorry I didn't do the best, make it the way I knew it was supposed to be. I got a little upset. I let my emotion get out of control, but I'm going to try harder. But I'm sorry I did what I did. And so telling your children that will make them know that not only are you wanting them to be great people, but you are striving to be a great person too. And that's what the Peaceful Solution is all about. We are great people because we keep trying. And at this time, let us all